Okay.
Begin.
All right. In 3, 2. Hey, what's going on, everybody? Happy Thanksgiving out there. I mean, we're going to eat a little turkey, maybe some stuffing, some cranberry sauce if you're Bob Harris. Do you indulge in the turkeys on Thanksgiving, Bob Harris, or do you do something else? I know you're a very healthy eater.
Turkey's very healthy. It's kind of a work day, though, so I don't have a lot of time to prepare the foods, so I just eat whatever. I'm not really worried about it.
Well, before you indulge in all of the gluttony that is Thanksgiving, make sure you keep it right here on the Believe Fantasy Football program with myself, Michael Fabiano, and the great legendary king, Bob Harris. We're going to break down waiver wires because, well, folks, it is right before the deadline here for when you have to put in your claims. And then we're going to go through the Thanksgiving Day games. And then our show for the weekend, we'll post that on Friday. So you have all of your weekend analysis for your starts and sits and everything you need to dominate this week. But first off, I want to talk about our sponsor because the last of the major pro sports leagues is off and rolling. College basketball is ready to go as well. Bet Online remains your top spot for all your live betting action and contests. NFL, college football, UFC, NHL, all the stuff that Bob really loves. It's all in full swing. Bet Online is your number one source for wagering, news, odds, trends, and predictions. All the hoops bet action, along with every sport available at your fingertips, with both desktop and mobile access at any time. Head to the Bet Online today and remember to use the promo code BELIEVE, BLEAV, for your 50% off welcome bonus on your first deposit. That's promo code BLEAV for your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Bet Online, where the games start. And the games start this week on Thursday. Remember, 3 Turkey Day games. Detroit, Green Bay, my beloveds, and the Commanders, and Seattle, San Francisco. But before we get into those games, let's get into some of the injuries that we're going to have to deal with because last week, Bob stunk. Like everybody got hurt. Every single player that got hurt last week was on one of my teams. So it was especially painful. Joe Burrow and Mark Andrews grew out in the same game. Ken Walker, he's got an oblique. Looks like he's going to miss some time. Aaron Jones with the knee. Short week for both of those running backs. They're both playing on Thursday. And then Cooper Kupp, he's hurt again. Jeez Louise, with the ankle. So people, Bob, are really going to be looking for options off the waiver wire to replace these players. Let's start off at quarterback. And of course, we like to do our bobbing for bargains, but let's go through the entire list of waiver wire options. We'll start off with the quarterback position. Say I have Joe Burrow and I don't have a really good number 2 quarterback on my roster. Is there someone on the waiver wire, Bob, that I can pick up for this week?
I feel like people have given up on Jordan Love, and maybe I think he's like, if you look out at Yahoo and places, 42% rostered, so people have kind of given up on him. And he's thrown multiple touchdowns in consecutive weeks. He's had good matchups. He should have cashed in on that, but I think maybe he can do it again this week. He's got some emerging threats at wide receiver, some that we may talk about momentarily. And they're going to have to throw the football because I don't know if A.J. Dillon's going to carry them with the running game minus Aaron Jones this week.
Yeah, so I think quarterback is probably a bit thin. When I look at my rankings for this week and every team is playing, there's no buys. I look at like the lower third of the league and I'm like, geez Louise, I mean, I can't even start any of these guys. It's that bad. But Gardner Minshew could be available in some leagues. He's got Tampa this week. Baker Mayfield maybe also out there. He's got Indianapolis in that matchup. So those are a couple of other options. Running backs. You know, Bob, I looked on the waiver wire. I can't find anybody. The only player, and everyone's going to be putting in claims for this guy because Ken Walker's hurt, is Zach Charbonnet. Are there any other running backs out there that you feel like might be able to help us this week? And how much of your budget would you put down on Charbonnet in a fab league?
I'd probably blow my budget. Like if I needed a win this week, if I was trying to stay in the running, I would probably blow my fab budget. You know, we don't know how long Walker's going to be out. Certainly seems like it'll be this week. It's not a great matchup, right? So be mindful of that. But I think, you know, if you're one of those people who conserves your fab budget, I'm one of those. This is why you're looking for an opportunity to get a win with a guy who's going to come in and at least get a featured role. And he's been working a little more in the receiving game. Had 6 catches this past game as a check down for Geno Smith, who's maybe got a little arm issue and maybe going to be looking to check down a little more. So there's that. And then, I think like there's at least one in the bobbing for free agents category as well in Ty Johnson, but you're taking your chances.
Yeah, there's not much. Running back's thin right now. Wide receiver is not, though. And there's some familiar names, at least on my list, Bob. I think the number one option off the wire, and there's several again that are really good that are out there, but Demario Douglas got dropped in a lot of leagues because the Patriots had a bye. He's got the Giants this week. He's 33% owned on Yahoo. He's a really good ad. And how about, let's talk about Odell Beckham Jr. 29% ownership on Yahoo. And he's had 3 or 4 good games in a row, Bob. And he's got the Chargers this week.
He's definitely on my list. In fact, I think it's been a touch. He scored at least double-digit fantasy points in each of the last 3 games. Scored a touchdown in 2 of the last 3. The Ravens are obviously going to have to adjust where their targets were going with Mark Andrews out. So I think he's the obvious pick to me. Yeah. Well, there's one other obvious pick.
Jaden Reed. Jaden Reed, 11 plus points in 4 of his last 5 games, including 19 last week. He is the best fantasy wide receiver in Green Bay. I like him better than Romeo Doubs and certainly better than Christian Watson at this point, who's been a disappointment. But Reed needs to be rostered in leagues. He's got Detroit on Thursday. Elijah Morris floating around out there. If Cooper Kupp is forced to miss time, Tutu Atwell also worth a look. What are your thoughts on A.T. Perry in New Orleans as like maybe one of those bobbing for bargains plays?
He is one of those bobbing for bargains plays. I'll just throw him out there. I mean, it's Ty Johnson. It is, I do think A.T. Perry. Look, Rashid Shaheed might be available in leagues too. Either one of those. But Perry, assuming there is no Michael Thompson and there's no, or Michael, why am I blanking on the name? Michael Thomas, yeah.
There you go.
Assuming he's not going to play it seems like a safe assumption. It seems like Perry's going to come in. I think he tied a lobby for the most routes run on the team last week, played 9 more snaps than Shaheed. So I think with Shaheed playing in the slot and Perry on the outside in the Michael Thomas role, that's pretty good spot in that offense. Depending on the quarterback, maybe not, doesn't matter. Maybe even if it's Derek Carr still in the concussion protocol. Right. So even if it's James Winston is willing to sling the ball.
Yeah, and if Carr doesn't play this week, then Jameis is a good pickup off the wire too against Atlanta. And a game that could see some points. Tight end is thin. Bob and I talked about like Luke Musgrave last week, but the one player who will be the most added, maybe across the board, Bob, is Isaiah Likely.
I don't know that he's a 1-for-1. I think we're hoping we're getting a 1-for-1 replacement for Mark Andrews.
No, I don't see that.
I think a lot of our good feelings about Isaiah Likely are based on a really solid rookie exhibition season, right? Where he put up huge numbers. We're hoping that, that's there, but it was exhibition football when we saw his best work. So, and remember, Charlie Kolar's come on since then and is going to have a role as well. I think this might be split up a little bit. There's some players to watch, though, on for returns. Like Greg Dulcich is eligible to return for the Denver Broncos. Haven't heard anything that he's going to. Zach Ertz, eligible to return for the Cardinals. I don't know how playable of a commodity he is with the rise of Trey McBride, but they were splitting pretty fairly. They were both being pretty productive right before his injury. So that's always go out and check and see if people have moved on from players who are, if your league, especially if you play in a league that there's no IR, people maybe had to move on from Kyron Williams or other players who are available and coming off IR. Keep an eye out for them.
Jonnu Smith may have gotten dropped too because before the bye week, he did not put up a good line. Has New Orleans this week. That's another potential player. If Gerald Everett can't go this week, Donald Parham could still be floating around out there. So there are some options. Isaiah is likely to be the best one. I'm sorry.
You had to do it.
I have to. Look, it's the same thing with Brock Purdy. It's my personality. If I talk about Brock, I'm going to probably talk about how pretty good he's been lately. Anyway,
I think it's like when you say Cowboys and you have to say beloved. Everyone out in the world goes, "Oh my gosh, did he say that?"
I listen. I mean, I've been a Cowboys fan since I'm 8 years old, man. So I love the Cowboys, even though they break my heart every year. Anyways, speaking of the Cowboys, Thanksgiving Day. All right, first game of the day, Bob. Let's break it. Let's break these games down. Packers, Lions. Lions are a 7.5 point favorite right now. The over/under 47.5. The Packers are 3-5-1 against the spread this year. The Lions are 7-3 against the spread. They're 5-3 against the spread in their last 8 Thanksgiving Day games. Take that for what it's worth. Let's start off with the Packers, Bob. Jordan Love, probably somebody you could start in a pinch. Although
Yes.
we've got our full complement of quarterbacks, there's just not a lot of good ones. But what do you think about Jordan Love?
I think he's certainly a viable play. As I mentioned previously, he's got multiple touchdowns the last couple of games. He seems to be coming, at least getting some feel for his receiving core. And by the way, it's, the pecking order might not be what we expected. Like Christian Watson may be at the bottom. You've got Jaden Reed coming on strong, as you mentioned. Romeo Doubs has been fairly solid. Dontavius Wicks is coming on as well. He's a player to keep an eye on. And Watson got the touchdown last week and saved us all who were invested in him. But this is not a horrible passing attack, and they maybe have a need to play catch up right at some point because the Lions' offense is pretty potent.
Yeah, I don't. And again, we don't know if Aaron Jones is playing yet. I would guess he won't. If he doesn't, AJ Dillon's worth a look because he's going to get volume, but the matchup is bad. Detroit's really good against the run. So AJ Dillon is a risk reward flex for me at best. We talked about the wide receivers. I think in order, and Bob, you correct me if I'm wrong, in order of Packers wide receivers to start, I think it's Jaden Reed, Dobbs, and then Watson.
Probably so.
Luke Musgrave worth a look also. On the other side of this, it's kind of a chalk game. Although I will tell you this, Jared Goff's last 2 games at home have not been great from a fantasy standpoint. I had been kind of leaning on that trend. The Packers defense is not bad against quarterbacks at all. They're a little bit banged up in the defensive backfield though, Bob. Is Jared Goff in your top 10 quarterbacks this week? Is he in the top 12? What's your level of faith in him?
He's probably in the top 12. I don't think, like last game kind of soured people a little bit. I think probably too much. In the end, the production will be there. If you're not in leagues that penalizing for interceptions, you don't care. Right. But that was I think that game against Chicago is a bit of an outlier. I think there'll be a fine rebound. And if he winds up in the top 10, won't surprise me. But he's definitely a locked in starter for me this week.
So Goff is a go. Both of the running backs, Jahmyr Gibbs, David Montgomery, are a go. That we've seen the last 2 weeks. There's plenty of touches for them to both be productive in fantasy. Amon-Ra St. Brown is a lock. I don't know that there's anybody else at wide receiver in Detroit that I will trust. But do we expect Sam Laporta to bounce back from one of his worst games of the year?
Yeah, I would think so. It was, again, an outlier, 3 catches. That's not going to be the norm. The targeting should be heavier. And without, it's interesting because we are starting to see Jamison Williams come on a little bit at wideout. But, between him and Josh Reynolds and the other pieces, they traded for Donovan Peoples-Jones. He didn't catch his 1 target. So it's kind of like so thin at the receiving spots, not manned by Amon-Ra St. Brown that you have to believe Laporta's going to rebound.
Did you see Jamison Williams ate a McDonald's burger and put ice cream on it? I think
all in, baby. He's all in.
Oh, awful. All right. Anyways, let's go to my beloveds and the Commanders, who just got owned by Tommy DeVito last week. The Cowboys are an 11-point favorite. The over-under is 48.5. The Commanders are 5-6 against the number this year. Dallas is 7-3, and they're 4-0 at home. But here's a stat that I looked at, and I'm like, I don't like this one. The Cowboys are 1-7 against the spread in their last 8 Thanksgiving Day games. They've played Washington 3 times. They're 1-2. So take that trend for what it's worth. The Cowboys, they cover double-digit spreads very easily, and I think they could do that here. But this is also, for me, like one of those games where Cowboys are playing well. We kill bad teams. Commanders are coming off a bad loss. It seems like a potential letdown game for Dallas, so maybe it's going to be a little bit closer than we expect. Let's get into the fantasy assets. We'll start with the Commanders. Sam Howell is a top 10 fantasy quarterback. He has more fantasy points right now than Patrick Mahomes.
Yep.
Which, by the way, that's a conversation that we can have for another time. Maybe on Thursday's program or Friday's program. Patrick Mahomes is a QB 10 right now. 10. He's averaging 18 points a game. Last year, he was close to 25. Don't tell me that not having a good receiver or 2 on that team is not hurting him. Because if you watch the game on Monday night,
at least something that might catch the football. That would be a good starting point.
Brutal. Mahomes, listen, I don't care. People can come after. Mahomes has been a dud this year. I'm sorry. He's been a dud.
Top 3. We drafted him in the top 3 of quarterbacks. He is not up there. The other 2 who were drafted are up there. 23.6 points per game for Josh Allen. 23.4 for Hurts. Patrick Mahomes all the way down outside the magical 20, well outside the magical 20 point per game window that we're looking for.
Bob, I think a lot of people are going to struggle with the decision to start or sit Sam Howell this week. Where are you at?
I'll play him. I mean, it's a tough defense, but the volume is still there. Like, you got to check your options, and maybe you have somebody reasonable. But I mean, the guy has been, as close to the 20 points per game, that magical 20 points per game without getting in that you can be. So I'm fine playing him. Hope he can avoid the pass rush. He has some good downfield targets. I'll hang in there with him, assuming I don't have like an option that I feel is good. Like I maybe would go with Jared Goff ahead of him this week.
Yeah. I'm a little worried about Howell this week, but he always seems to get, even if it's garbage time points. I mean, he's putting up numbers. So he's still, in the low QB1 range, even though he's ranked higher than that.
Fabs, he leads the league in attempts, 442. The next closest is Josh Allen at 382. I mean, it's just a volume-based number, right?
Yep. No, great point. Great fact there. You're starting Brian Robinson, even though the matchup's not great. I think you're playing McLaurin, even though the matchup's not great. I don't know that I trust any other Commanders receivers.
No, they're outliers.
Curtis Samuel, Jahan Dotson, Logan Thomas, probably going to fade those guys. Cowboys. First off, before we get into this, can we talk about the Cowboys defense? I know you have the Cowboys defense in at least one league. I have it. The Cowboys defense has been fabulous in fantasy. Fantastic. And you got the Commanders who give up sacks like, Bob Harris eats turkeys on Thanksgiving. He just gobbles them up. The Cowboys defense has been great. I don't think there's a player on this roster who's fantasy relevant that I wouldn't start this week. Dak is a fantastic start against the Commanders, who gave up 20 plus to Tommy DeVito, made him look like Phil Simms, for crying out loud. You're starting Pollard, who had a touchdown last week. You're obviously starting CD, who's got a little ankle, but he should be good. I can see starting Brandon Cooks. Jake Ferguson's in play. Brandon Aubrey's in play, and so is the Cowboys defense. Am I missing anybody?
No, I think that is the list. And again, you're looking for that magical 20 points per game. Dak is exactly at that. Has a good volume as well. Has added a little bit of running recently. I think the intriguing piece is Tony Pollard. Did he get jump started in Carolina? Was it enough? And like, we could have gotten more from him had that not been a blowout. I don't think he took a snap in the fourth quarter of that game.
Right.
So, that was maybe a little bit of a limiting factor if you're looking, he only had 60 yards. Well, he only needed 60 yards. The touchdown run was nice. It was like, what 22-yard touchdown run. Looked nice. We're hoping he's off the schneid. And you're playing him either way, and you've been disappointed most of the season. Hopefully he can start gaining a little traction here.
Mm-hmm. And I think maybe a small part of why Pollard isn't producing, I think there's other issues, but the Cowboys have killed so many teams that, I mean, how many snaps has he played in the fourth quarter, right? To your point last week, they sit their starters. I mean, Cooper Rush has finished a few games for the Cowboys lately too, because, we're just beating the pants off of teams, and that could be the case on Thursday against the Commanders too. But
for a guy who people drafted to be a running back one, like whether you got him late in the first round, I think it was more likely early in the second round. I mean, he's running back 22 right now. He is averaging single-digit fantasy points per game. This is a problem for that investment, and it's making some hard decisions. And you may have had players who rise up, and maybe one that he's playing against, Brian Robinson Jr. Or I mean, there's been plenty of running backs that have kind of come on and surprised people. Jerome Ford. People who are out producing Tony Pollard might give you tough weekly decisions every week that you didn't expect to have to make.
No, trust me. I thought Pollard would be very good. I was worried about Zeke not being there, but it is what it is with Pollard. You're probably going to have to roll him out there. Last game, NFC West battle, Niners, Seahawks. Niners currently a 6.5 point favorite. The over-under is 43. Both teams 6-4 against the spread. Both teams are 3-2 on the road, Niners. At home, Seattle. So the trends give me nothing. Seattle has not played well lately after being in first place for about 2 seconds in that division. The Niners have now usurped them after winning a couple of big games. Thoughts on Brock Purdy, who, by the way, Bob and I made a big trade last week because I was screwed at quarterback and I had to give up Keenan Allen to get Brock Purdy in a package deal. I think the trade worked out for both of us, at least in the first week. How high do you have Brock Purdy ranked this week? Is he a top 10 quarterback? Would you play him over, say, Justin Herbert, who's got the Ravens, or Tua, who's got the Jets?
I think you would have to give that some consideration. I don't like to outsmart myself. I like to play these great offenses, but when they have
How
tough
can you
matchups,
outsmart yourself, Bob Harris? It's not possible. Come
well,
on.
look, that is the nature of fantasy managers, right? That's one of our, our biggest weaknesses is that desire to outsmart ourselves and not have like a depth chart. Like, I mean, I think you should work your team. Last week, how many questions did we get, on our radio shows about Josh Allen or Josh Dobbs, right? I mean, people are doubting Josh Allen, and when you do that, you go and you divorce the name from the numbers. Just look at the totals, look at the average scoring, and go with that. The thing about Brock Purdy is he's just so even keeled, and there aren't a lot of lousy games. There have been some, one or two, but for the most part, he has been really even keeled. He's right up at that 20-point per game mark. Like if you're having a weekly Patrick Mahomes or Brock Purdy decision, it's tough.
Imagine that, and you're right. I have Patrick Mahomes in a couple of leagues, and I got to be honest with you, I'm regretting that I drafted him. And maybe it'll be better. Right now, it's not. I didn't draft him in the second or third round to be an 18-point per game guy.
Fabs, the Chiefs in the second half, they have 53 points.
Yeah,
just over 5 points per game in the second half. And they have receivers who are, I mean, you will all focus on the Marquez Valdez-Scantling drop, but the Justin Watson, that ball went right through his hands at the end, right? Kelsey had a drop as well. So there's plenty of blame to go around. But in general, they're living on their defense. I mean, 177 yards from Mahomes, 2 touchdowns. Those 2 touchdowns saved them. But for the most part, I mean, I'm thinking Brock Purdy's a pretty solid play this week. Probably, he's certainly a quarterback one. Whether he makes it up into my top 10, I'll have to check.
So again, 5 points a game is what the Chiefs are averaging in the second half this year. 5. That's the Chiefs.
That's correct.
People wonder why I said they're not going back to the Super Bowl. Anyways, let's get back to this 49ers Seahawks game. I think for the Niners, it's chalk. Purdy, George Kittle's been hotter than hell. I mean, that guy, boy, somebody lit a fire under his ass, and he's been amazing after a really slow start. Brandon Ayuk is a must start. What are your thoughts on Debo? Yeah, like I've argued that Debo's breakout year was an outlier. He's a 13-point per game guy. Some games he'll be better. Some games he'll be worse. The matchup says start him. What are your thoughts on Debo?
I think you can start him, right? He's in that range. I don't want to say he's like a tough wide receiver 3 decision, but he's down in that range of wide receiver 3s, right? I mean, you look at the points per game, it's not in the double digits. We're at what? I want to say 8.7. It is 8.7. And he's going to help you avoid a 0. I'll take that sometimes. I mean, I think that's his value, but that high upside player that we came to love is the wide back role. That all diminished with the arrival of Christian McCaffrey. He's not that anymore. He will make big plays on occasion, but that's what you need to have him really maximize the return on his value at any given point, whether you're playing him at DFS or in your weekly leagues. I'm not pushing him into lineups, but I'm open to it.
All right. For the Seahawks, I'm not playing Geno, especially at less than 100%. I don't love Charbonnet because the matchup's bad, but volume is there. So, you're going to get him into your lineups. DK, it finally looked like DK last week, had a big game. What about Tyler Lockett? Tyler Lockett is, and at the end of the year, his numbers typically look pretty good, but he's the most inconsistent player from a week-to-week basis, I think, that I've dealt with in fantasy for the last few years. He's still dealing with a hamstring injury. It's a short week. Should we maybe keep him on the sidelines this weekend?
So San Francisco's defense is not the greatest at stopping receivers, right? So I think I could play him. I'm a little worried about, as you are about Geno Smith, that injury is going to be a limiting factor for him. And it's not like you need to force him into your lineup. Tyler Lockett at 8.1 points per week. He's only got 4 touchdowns so far, but the week you sit him, he's going to be one of his patented great games, right? So, and by the way, he's not that far off from DK Metcalf. He's just at 9.2 points per game. So it's not like he's going great guns either. This is maybe a place where you want to invest more in the rushing attack if you can.
All right. So, that you look
Brandon Ayuk, you left out though, but the best player in.
No, I mentioned him. I said he's, you're starting him, right?
Well, we should just say how great he is because.
Go ahead. Speak, preach.
Well, I mean, it's been super consistent. You're looking at about 12 points a game. He had some downturns. The touchdowns have been the issue, right? He hadn't been getting the touchdowns. The 49ers get in the red zone. They're one of the top teams in reaching the end zone. I think there's going to be some positive touchdown regression coming. And I'm all in on Brandon Ayuk. Please, more.
Yeah, big fan. Love me some Brandon Ayuk. Ayuk is on fire, as they say on the radio calls.
Is that what they say?
For the Niners? All right, so that's your look at the waiver wire and the Thanksgiving Day games. I got 4 players in must start or get smart this week. And we've talked about one of them already at length. Patrick Mahomes. This week he's got the Raiders. Now, don't laugh when I tell you this, but the Raiders actually are not like this, rollover team when it comes to quarterbacks. They're not. Okay? They're not. This is not a bad defense. They're at home. They're playing better since Josh McDaniels, the cancer, was removed from that locker room. And Mahomes is the QB 10. You already said that you would think about starting Brock Purdy over Mahomes this week. And that's, people may have Dak and Mahomes. I would play Dak this week. Okay. So must start or get smart. Patrick Mahomes, Bob.
Get smart. Look at your options. Check who you're playing. Divorce the name from the numbers, as I suggest. Go out and go into your league's, stats if you're on an online commissioner, and look at, most importantly, average points per game. Right? If you have someone, and it's not hard to think you might have somebody who's outperforming him. But also don't react overly negatively to the numbers. He is, at 19 points a game. So don't go crazy. Don't start trying to stick Josh Dobbs in there ahead of him. And, look, and Josh Dobbs had a little run and it's legit and everything. But, think about what you're doing. Like if you're ramming Will Levis in after his huge debut game, you see the problem with this. Don't chase points. Don't chase momentary flashes. Chase the consistent production. So check your stats, see where Patrick Mahomes is, but he's not a locked-in must start.
That's crazy. I agree with you too. All right, Derrick Henry, single digits in 2 straight games. The Titans' offense is pitiful. Their offensive line isn't great either, but they've got the Panthers this week. But still, is Derrick Henry a must start every week, or should we get smart?
You're playing the name if you're playing Derrick Henry every week right now. That's just, that's just the facts, people. We're down at 11.1 points per game on the season. So the last 2 games have been a little miserable. I do like this matchup, but again, go out and compare. Look at the players on your roster. Just in general, if you're starting 2 running backs and probably have a flex, he's probably going to make your lineup cut, and you're hoping for one of the big games. Just realize the downside in the range of possible outcomes. What you've seen the last 2 weeks is definitely not out of the question.
Yeah, he does have the Panthers this week. It's a good matchup. I'm starting him. He's got Houston twice and Seattle in the fantasy playoffs, but are you going to get there to take advantage of those matchups with Derrick Henry? I agree with you. Must start or get smart. I can't believe I'm saying this. Jamar Chase.
You're probably starting him, right? He's a very good player. I was a little encouraged, like a couple things about Jake Browning. He was willing to put the ball down the field and try to hit Jamar Chase. The one where he really made the effort was like 2 yards out of bounds. So there was that. But also Jake Browning worked with the starting offense throughout training camp, the entire month of August, because Joe Burrow had the calf injury. So I want to play a good player who might be a target monster. Maybe they have to refigure the offense. We've seen Jamar Chase. Remember Joe Burrow, the first game, he kind of really peppered him with targets. It was that 15 catch game, and it was really, really heavy usage, but it was shorter stuff. Maybe we see more of that. I'm still playing Chase.
All right, last one. Evan Ingram had been pretty consistent. Last 2 games, not so great. Thin position, must start or get smart, and he has got Houston this week.
It's a great matchup. He must start this week. I can't. Last game against Houston, he fared really well. Expect more of the same. And I think, I don't want to overstate the case, but Zay Jones makes a difference in this offense. Makes a difference to Calvin Ridley. You look at his 3 games this season where he's come through, including last week. What is the common factor? Zay Jones. So he kind of opens things up for the other pieces there. It's not like he's a hugely productive piece in and of himself, Zay Jones, but he does seem to open things up, and part of that's going to benefit Evan Ingram, but mostly the matchup will.
Love it. All right, Bob Harris, as always, Football Diehards at Football Diehard, on every social media platform. You can find him on OnlyFans as well. No, I'm just kidding. Although maybe, I don't know, maybe he does. Everyone else is doing it. Everybody out there, Have a great Thanksgiving. Enjoy time with your family, friends, football, all that stuff. Make sure you get those lineups set Wednesday night, because Thursday morning, who knows? You're going to be cooking a turkey. You're going to make it stuffing. You got to make that homemade cranberry sauce. That's the best. The whole berry cranberry sauce, Bob Harris, is the bee's knees. I
The most
absolutely love it.
overrated dish on Thanksgiving is the
Crazy.
cranberries.
Stop it. Would you stop it? Stuff. And you know what? I like the stovetop. I don't even care. I don't need like fancy stuffing. Give me the stovetop. I dig it. I absolutely love that. Are you a stuffing fan, Bob Harris?
Like I'm not against it. Like I'll just get out my Jenny-O turkey loaf roll or something and throw some stovetop on it. I don't know.
Do you not get a turkey actually and put it in the oven and bake it? Like, you know, what do you do?
I work.
Yeah, he is the hardest working man. By the way, you know, maybe you send Bob Harris a turkey leg or something, because he needs something to gnaw on when he's working, 12 hours on Thanksgiving. I tell you one thing that I like, and that's Bob Harris. And I love you guys for listening. Thank you so much for listening to the Believe Fantasy Football Show, presented by Bet Online. Have a great Thanksgiving. Thank you, Bob Harris. You're the best. He'll be back
Happy
next
Thanksgiving.
week. I'll be back on Friday. We'll talk about the rest of the games for Week 12. We'll see you then.